Hello everyone and welcome back in. Well, we are on episode number 5 of our M3 Stuart project, and this is volume 2 of our making of the base because, well, there's a lot to do with this base. We got a pretty good start on the last episode, and this is episode, well, we'll complete the process. And because there's a lot to do, well, we'll take our time and we'll show basically every step along the way. So this will be one of those where we let the camera roll. So let's get started here. Just to start off with, we have our Sculpey Base. Of course, I tried Sculpey for the first time in the last episode as basically the molding putty to put everything together, and I really do like that. And then over the top, I'm using the AK acrylic paste. I have beach sand and I have sandy desert. Just little blobs of those on various places and kind of moving those together using some bigger brushes here, just kind of manipulating that around. The color works very nicely as well, so I won't have to do very much in terms of weathering this in order to get the final scene. And now, of course, if you've been with me for a little while, this is the blue bowl of good stuff, and in there I've got a few twigs and sticks and pieces of bark and just little natural things, and I'm just going to add a few of those to the base here because I just want to add a little bit of, I guess we would call it organic clutter, just to kind of start making the scene really start to come to life. For those of you who have worked on diorama bases and vignettes before, of course, you understand there's a lot of steps that just are repeated over and over again just to get things right. Of course, when we first laid the Sculpey layer down, the initial layer of terrain, we pressed down with the Stuart in order to get the weight of the vehicle. And now that we've added a second layer, well, we're going to do the same. And I'm at this point now where we're not too far along, but we're far enough along that I really need to tidy up these edges here. So once again, pull out my hot glue gun. Yep, got those new bullets. It's going to be working fine. Very, very thin balsa wood here. Just apply that to the edge, get that lined up. And then I'll flip it over here on its side just to give a little bit of weight, just to make sure it's all in contact. And I'll do that for all 4 sides here, just to make sure we have a nice edge to our base. Once that glue has set, just take the tip of my knife and just kind of run along the edge, just kind of following the elevation, just to make everything nice and flush with the base itself. And then once all that is all nicely trimmed up, well then, of course, yep, we're going to go take a couple steps backwards. We'll break out the Sculpey again. And we'll just fill up any gaps that are right there along the edge. Just kind of press that in there. And then, of course, once we have the Sculpey in place, we need to make sure those textures and the colors on top are all nice and unified. So just a little light application of those terrain's textures. Okay, now we're starting to get to the fun part. Now we're going to start working on really the finishing touches here. This is the trench or the pillbox or whatever we want to call this here. And I need to add some more details here. So a little bit more reinforcements on those walls. And these are just round toothpicks. I'm just kind of popping those into place, just kind of sticking them into the foam, press them down in there, and then just nipping them off with my clippers. Very simple idea, and it looks like little small logs, so I'm kind of cheating there. And then once again, of course, need to kind of backfill again, adding a little bit of Sculpey on the back side just to make sure those look all nice and integrated into the scene. And then one of the things that happens, and this happens every time, is as I start adding these textures over the top of one another, things get dirty. And these sandbags, these were made from Magic Sculpt. Well, I want to paint those, but I have a little bit of grit on those from some of the texture paste just kind of dripping on top of it. So I'm just kind of brushing those off with a little bit of that fiberglass pin that I used on my soldering that kind of polishes it off. This is where we start unifying the base with some light washes. These are acrylic washes using Gen 3 acrylic paints. Nice and thin down, just kind of give a sandy tone on most of the scene and some little darker tones around the trench. And now I can come back and start painting out the details. So someone mentioned in one of my comments earlier on that my logs look like little carrots, and of course they do, but we'll take care of that now. So paint them in the same process as we painted the palm trees, a dark base using the ash gray color, and then I'll come back in over the top of those and stipple the lighter colors. I guess the question is, why didn't I paint these before I installed them? But I think that comes back to the back and forth nature, at least the way that I work. A lot of these, again, they get splashed on, covered up, washes come over the top of them, so I end up having to touch them up anyway, so I just find it much easier just to, a lot of these finer details, just to go ahead and paint them once they're already in place. Speaking of painting, of course, this is when the scene starts to really come to life. Just to start off here, I decided to paint the sandbags, just a good starting spot here, adding some color, and you can already see the vibrancy. It's starting to get that feeling of the scene that I'm looking for. You know, really painting on your diorama is no different than painting on, say, a vehicle. So as we would add, say, pin washes or shadows around, say, tools or surface features, same thing on your diorama. So that's what I'm doing here, just adding a few shadows along some of these different elements just to make them pop. And this is a perfect example of the power of just paint. These little sections, these little retaining walls made from the palm logs that we made from the first episode, well, they don't look like much right now. They don't look like palm logs, but just a little bit of paint and just taking care to look at a few references, or maybe your stack of firewood outside just to see what fresh cut logs look like. Well, it turns them into something that looks more or less like a piece of cut wood. Looking at some of the references, it seems as though the Japanese had a fairly decent supply of corrugated metal in order to help reinforce their pillboxes or slit trenches, and I wanted to show that in this scene as well. So I've got a little bit of corrugated here that I've made, and then I'm just going to give it an oxidized aluminum color. Continuing on with our bunker, now it's time to put everything together. Actually, we're kind of destroying it, so time to take everything apart, because I want this to look as though it's been hit by a shell or grenade or something like that. There's obviously some damage. A few broken timbers that might be the roof supports. Our piece of tin, just kind of press that into place. And then just to lock everything together and smooth it in with the remainder of the overall scene, I'm going to use Magic Sculpt this time because I know that this dries hard, and once everything's cured, this will be nice and locked into place. And once that Magic Sculpt is cured, I can come back over the top with some more of that terrains paste, the sand textures, and just make sure everything is nice and blended together in terms of textures. And then just a quick wash with some of those acrylic colors just to make sure everything is nice and blended together visually. Now I just want to continue to add pieces of what is basically clutter, just to add to the chaos of this trench or bunker that has been destroyed, and there's bits and pieces and debris just kind of scattered about. Just allow me a quick moment to say thank you to my Patreon. If you are enjoying this channel and would like to support it, please consider joining. In return, works in progress, photographs, early viewing of these videos, special features videos, and a Discord server for chats. Please consider joining. I hope to see you over there. I also wanted to try to capture in this scene just the charred remains of what this island was through the aerial bombardment, the naval shelling, and of course the Marines themselves used flamethrowers. There was a lot of smoke, a lot of fire, a lot of just destruction, and I want to try to capture that here as well. So a lot of those bits from the Blue Bowl of Good stuff, those organic bits, give them a little bit of a dark color, black gray color and just highlight them here and there with a little bit of white just to give them that kind of ashen effect. And yeah, that naval bombardment, the aerial bombardment, and of course the landings themselves, well, it did not do well for these palm trees. Many of them were sheared off directly, others broken in half. But what I want to do is just show some of the splintering from the broken parts here. So whether it be sheared off or just kind of leaning as this one is add some splinters, and that's just balsa wood, just little shavings of balsa wood, touched with a little bit of super glue, just kind of tap that into place, just to give it a little bit more texture and realism. Speaking of texture, I do want to do something with this base. It still seems, well, somewhat sterile, somewhat rigid. So I think if I use some of the seagrass and just place a few strands here and there, and it's all being held down with diluted PVA glue, white glue, and water, I think that will give it a nice South Pacific grass kind of feel. We'll see how this goes. Yeah, I don't think that turned out too bad. I can live with this. I think that gives it a nice texture for the base. And we shall continue. Well, I think we're finally at that point where we can plant our palm trees. If you missed the construction of these palm trees, we'll flip back one episode, episode number 4 of the Stuart series, and there I go over the construction of these palms. Pop a hole into the base. You can see where the armature wire comes in handy because now it's a little pin. A little bit of white glue to hold everything in place once it dries, some Sculpey around the bottom just to integrate it into the base, and then my fancy holding tools here just to keep everything upright while it dries. Just a hint of green and a little bit of shading around some of these areas just to kind of break it up just a bit. Well, this part should be fairly familiar for anybody who's been following along with my dioramas as throughout these series. This is where everything starts to pop, and this is bringing out and pinpointing individual rocks here and there. Of course, this one we have a bit of a burnt aspect, so on these burnt patches, adding a little bit more dark effects and light ash effects on some of this grass, for instance. Now we're really starting to get down to the final wire here, adding these final details. So one of these palm trees that's been shattered, broken in half, kind of laying over. This will anchor this corner over here. This will be the tree that our Marine is going to be leaning up against in our final scene. Just a few final touches here. So these again are some of the palm fronds that are made from feathers. And these will be a little bit more distressed. Some brown tones, little blacks here and there, grays. Maybe these have been charred, a little bit burnt. And then we could just add those to the scene as well. And this is about the point where I was going to leave this scene, but then I had a few people, especially on Patreon, say, how about if you add just a few elements from the Japanese, a helmet here or a rifle or something like that. So I went ahead, purchased out the Tamiya kit, the older one. grabbed a few helmets off of there and a rifle, and I placed those in the scene as just a few final touches. And I think that's going to wrap up this episode, which means, of course, that we're wrapping up this series. All 5 episodes of the M3 Stuart, starting off with the Tamiya kit all dazzled up with some photo etch, and of course building the scene and the figures using feathers. It was a fun series. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do enjoy this series and you do enjoy these episodes, please hit that subscribe button. If you'd like some more content and would like to support this channel even further, I do have a Patreon page. The link for that is in the description below. Please consider joining. We've got some good stuff coming up in the future. I hope you enjoy these final photographs. We'll see you soon. Take care, everybody, and of course, happy modeling.